Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of class. I hope everything's going well and moving along with the material quite nicely, I feel like. And so this week we are, getting into some of really, again, some diving in a little bit deeper with this understanding of wholeness and holism, and specifically focusing on a topic that I think is absolutely critical to our ability to grasp this whole concept, and I think beyond that, not just grasp it, but to implement it in our lives, and both at work and at home and wherever else. And so this week's reading, as you saw, is quite a bit different from what we've done up till this point. So this is not reading that's in a book, but rather reflections, and there are only a week's worth of reflections here, and they come from the Center for Action and Contemplation, written by Father Richard Rohr. And so part of my strategy here is to introduce you to his work. I know we've probably talked about him already. If you're not familiar, so this will get you a little bit more familiar with some of their work, at least from the Center for Action and Contemplation. And so this comes actually, these reflections come from back in 2017. So on one level, I think some people would say, well, geez, that's not really up to date, but truth is truth, I think. And so this I don't think ever is going to go out of date, this type of material. And so what I would suggest for you for this week is you can certainly read through this and get through it in, really fast, because, there's not as much reading there. The point of this is not to just get through the material in a cognitive, reasoning, thinking mind kind of way, but to try to absorb it a little bit and reflect on it. And that's the purpose of the readings for this week. We will go back into more textbook reading as we keep moving through the course, but this is a little bit of a left turn in our readings through the week or through this course, so that we really can grasp this topic of non-dualism. And so hopefully, if you started doing the readings already, or the reflection readings already, or if you haven't, I think this is a topic that we can, I think, easily pick up on and get an idea of what it's all about. There is some of this in Chronically American, so the language is probably not new. Hopefully it's not new anyway. But this is a bit deeper dive this week. So anyway, so as you are read in Chronically American, and as you will read through these reflections, we kind of go through basically the first half of our life, and this isn't to say age's first half, but the first half of our lives, learning to separate this from this, or looking at the differences between this and this, or saying that one thing might be good, and if it's good, then there's an opposite to it, and this thing is bad. If it's not this, then this. And so it's either this or that type of what is referred to as binary or dualistic thinking. It all takes place in the brain, and it really is a way for us to kind of make sense of the world in a lot of ways. If you're a Sesame Street fan, like I was when I was a kid, they used to sing this song that I used to sing to myself still when I was in pharmacy school in my late 20s, that one of these things is not like the other. And it got us as very young age to try to differentiate two things or three things or four things. But the idea was to look at the differences. Okay, and that's all really well and good. Our entire academic process is based on that type of logic and reasoning. And skill, and to be able to do that well as a student, to differentiate this from that. And that's great for us as in very much needed, particularly through our first half of life. But as we move into the second half of life, and again, this doesn't mean like if I'm going to live till 80 years old, that at 40 I switch gears. This is a transition of seeing, a transition of knowing. And this doesn't take place in the head. This is somewhere else. Our ways of seeing and our ability to hear, not just with our ears or see just with our eyes. But it's a transition of second half of life seeing. And this moves us into non-dualism. And that changes if we can get there, which unfortunately, I think a lot of people can't get there, because I know a lot of people who are in their, towards the end of life, and they still are super cynical, and they see only the differences between things, and they don't have this vision of being able to see the whole. And I think because of that, there's a lot of anxiety that takes place, because we're just so caught up. And I would say unconscious, or not to a conscious level, an awareness level of seeing the whole. And so where non-dualism comes in is it's right there with something that ties right in with the idea of wholeness, holism. And so I think an easy way to look at some examples in our society is, particularly in the last, in our all lived experience of COVID, is the idea of the mask issue. And do you mask, do you not? And if you're on this side, then man, you're really not on this side, and it's this against this, and it's always competition, and one is right and the other is wrong. Whatever side you're on is right, and if you're not on that side, then you're wrong. And it can be even people within the same family. That goes with politics too, and we've seen that unfortunately over the last couple cycles of presidential elections, where it's very charged topics, where people feel uncomfortable even talking about it with their friends and family members because of the dualism. It's because of this idea that we can't let it go, that if I have this as an idea, then man, if somebody doesn't agree with me, then they're wrong, and they're over here and I'm over here and I'm sitting on the right side. And so that's I think really easy examples of this. And you can go then take this a little bit further and talk about pro-life and pro-choice, and to get into, again, some really uncomfortable conversations about what dualism can look like, and how it so greatly affects our health and our relationships, certainly our leadership, if we're in those roles, but it has a massive effect on our personal health, and hopefully this week you'll kind of be able to tie those things together. Why is it that in the first half of life, man, I'm really stressed, and I'm stressed about, am I going to have enough money? Am I going to have enough status? Am I going to have enough possessions? Am I going to have enough friends? Am I going to have enough likes on my social? Those things are all wrapped into this dualism, that if I have those, then I'm in some place that is well accepted. If I don't, then I'm in a place that's not well accepted socially. So that's another layer of dualism that we can I think can all relate to there. I think in broad scope, and this is where we're going to take this to the next topics we're going to, but dualism is a way for us to make ourselves feel like we're maybe separate from other people, and maybe separate and maybe more superior to others. So we set ourselves aside as to say, because I know this, or because I have these opinions, or my belief system is this. You see it in religion all the time. Then if someone isn't like me or isn't in my group, then they must be other. Those are the other people. And we've all used that language before, unfortunately, of othering. And that would be looking not at the way we are connected, and not at the way we are the very much sameness or similarities between us, but looking only at differences. dualism side, separate, superior. But then you get to, the non-dual side, and what you're starting to recognize once you move into this second half of life, as Rohr says, and many others have used that language, and it just makes so much sense to me, so I like to use it too. But once you move into that second half of life, again, not an age thing, but it is your process, your evolution. Maybe we can use it that way. If we can pull in some Delio back into Delio and Teilhard. But, non-dualism then looks at things from a much broader perspective, and maybe the broadest perspective of seeing that all things are necessary, and all things have a rightness and a goodness to them as they exist within the whole. Okay, so we learn to see rightly that all things are good and all things are necessary within the whole. Okay, and this is really hard to wrap our heads around, because when we get to that point, we start automatically thinking about the things that are not good. Okay, the evil that exists in the world and the suffering that exists in the world, and so much of it just seems so unnecessary. And certainly, I'm not arguing for any of that being something that we should at all accept as being some kind of something that should exist. And so this is where the tricky part comes, is that once we recognize that everything that we can even imagine is part of the whole, and we are part of that same whole, and so we are interconnected with all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then we can actually see a bit more clearly, and then really be able to see what is ours to do. So we have this contemplative stance that we are able to see through a bit more clearly, and then that helps guide our actions. What are our necessary actions? What is it that is ours to do? And we're getting a little bit ahead, but this is where we're going in this course, is, okay, what's my, if you want to look at it as purpose, but what is it that's mine to do? What is it that's ours to do in this world? And so that takes a different view. It's not the reductionism, performance, achievement objectives that we talked about in the last couple of weeks. This is something bigger than that. Okay, this is, as Richard Rohr likes to talk about, this is the story. Okay, I'm getting beyond my story, and I'm moving even beyond our story, meaning the people that I surround myself with, and the groups that I belong to, and the associations and the schools and the workplaces. There are people that are like me, that our story that I can, that I can embrace because it's like me and has my same interests. This is getting beyond that to accepting the story, that there's something very grand going on that I'm very much a part of and an important player in. And once I can see that I'm important in this, I can't help but also see it in other people also. So that if I'm a player in this and I'm important for everything, am interconnected with all of the whole, then so is everybody else. And that changes how we see other people, and that changes our relationships with others. And so then if we're in a leadership role, that matters, because we see ourselves then in a different way compared to this dualism. Okay, so if you're in a leadership role and you're dualistic, we've all had people like that we've reported to before, where there's a hierarchy, right? That there's somebody up here and there's somebody down here, and you might be in either one of those positions, and it's not fun being that person who is in working with somebody who's always feeling separate and superior to other people. It can happen in family dynamics, it can happen in the workplace, it can happen with friends, it can happen with social groups, but that's dualism played out in that space. But if you're in a leadership position working from a non-dual perspective, absolutely changes how you interact with other people, because you start to see the sameness. You start to see this idea of oneing, meaning O-N-E-I-N-G, that we are part of the same whole, as opposed to wanting, the W-O-N-I-N-G, where I need to win and I need to be competitive. Not saying competition is a bad thing, because it has a very good place, but taking it so seriously that everybody who is, on this side of the aisle is always against everybody who's on this side of the aisle, and there's no compromise there. And we see it play out in everyday life, and we know how bad that feels. And we know also how good it feels when we do the ONEING, that kind of wanting, where we're all on the same page. So, from a leadership side, I think it's easy to see that when we're othering and seeing only the differences and not the sameness, and that changes leadership style for sure. And then from a health and wellness side, looking at non-dualism from a health and wellness side is, oh my gosh, it just changes everything at a fundamental level, because no longer do you cling to these ideals. You don't, you push all of those things aside, because you can see the silliness and the non-importance of saying, well, I have this title, so then I get to have a puffy chest and, get to do these things to other people and say these things that are, maybe not so nice. Those types of clingingness, where we really latch onto our achievements or our titles, or it's just easy for me, the education, those kinds of, but also, my possessions, the social status I have, maybe the likes I have on social media. I mean, go down the line and list all of those things that we feel are so very important. If we can, we don't have to get rid of them by any means, but just not taking them so seriously. I think that's the point, is just not taking any of this quite so seriously, and allowing it to cause a division or a separateness feeling or a superior feeling with other people. And if we can get down that road, and we're talking health and wellness now, if we can get down that road, there is some sort of liberation, and there's some sort of freedom. And the reason I guess I'm going down with this is there's a decrease in anxiety, and there's a leveling out that we see with folks that just takes the air out of the room, as far as the tension air out of the room, and brings things to a much calmer, peaceful, joyful place. And so that comes with the idea of, non-dualism, the non-binary thinking. So that's kind of where I'm hoping for you to get, moving in that direction this week, because we're again keep building on these concepts. I mean, I feel like we're still, we're going to build all the way through this course, and this dualism, non-dualism is just another layer that we're stacking on top. So anyway, I am looking forward, as always, to your reflection papers and to your writings. I just am been really, really happy and impressed with how people are being able to relate this to their everyday lives in the context of their, personal and professional lives. So keep that up, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Talk soon.